All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everybody out to the last session for today. This is going to be a full room, so if you don't mind scooching in a little bit, I know it's going to be tight, but be greatly appreciated. This session is hacking Domo Webform, creating Excel-like reports in Domo. And I'd like to welcome out from Mobile Iron, Pierce or Gemma.
Welcome everybody. I know it's the end of the day, so I'm gonna start off with a ton of energy to try to keep you guys awake. I know I'm between you and more alcohol, which is a pretty dangerous position to be in. So by show of hands, how many people know how to raise their hands? Ooh, good. By show of hands, how many people like lame jokes? Okay, well the rest of you are screwed because I'm just filled with lame jokes, so sorry about that. Okay, big green button is forward. So hacking Domo web forms, we're gonna be creating Excel-like. I'm gonna use air quotes because Excel is extremely powerful. We're not gonna be able to use all of the features of Excel. We're just gonna build layouts that look like Excel reports. And also, it's not really hacking, so I'm gonna use the air quotes for that too. We will have time at the end of the session for questions, so please save them for that, unless, of course, I missed something terribly, and you can raise your hand enthusiastic, make me look like a fool. Everyone ready? I'll take that as a yes, okay. So the first thing I'm supposed to do is I'm supposed to introduce my company. So my name is Pierce or Gemma. I work for a company called Mobile Iron. We manage mobile devices, iOS, Android, Windows 10, Mac OS, and we focus on security, so we secure the devices, and we do more than just wiping the device when someone loses it. We do things like turning off the device or turning off your Wi-Fi if you connect to a malicious access point, those sorts of things. So it's pretty advanced. We're the leading independent vendor. Probably a lot of you guys in the audience today have our technology. And one of the things that, for your context that might be valuable for you is that you can actually use software like Mobile Iron or Mobile Iron itself to deploy Domo to your target audience's devices, or at least make it available to them through an enterprise app store type solution. So if you want to work with your IT teams to do something like that, that's an option that's available to you. And of course, our competitors can do some things like that too, so you can work with them that way. So this is just an image of what we're going to be creating. So I'm going to do the hand thing again. Sorry, but it just helps keep people awake. How many people here are like really new to Domo or don't even have, not even using Domo yet? Anyone? Okay, good. How many, and most of the rest I'm going to assume have decent experience and have put a card together that has a table. So for those of you who are new, you might not recognize the details of what we're looking at right here that's really unique and valuable. So if you look at the green line that says grand total, you see how it's green, which is not the same color as the other lines. And then you have grand total, which is right aligned. You also have the text that's bold. These are all things that you simply cannot do with the default Domo dashboard, or the Domo table card. And these are the types of things that we're going to be talking about how to do in this session. The other thing to notice is you see this whole quarter change section. It's entirely in its own separate area, right? There's no row alignment, there's no column alignment. It's just, it's actually kind of a mess, but that's the point that I'm trying to get across, is that you have a lot of control over the design, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So what are the major use cases? The major use cases, I'm going to tell you my major use case was our head of sales really was very comfortable with his weekly pipeline report, that someone would spend 2 or 3 hours every week, and probably even more during quarter end, to build the pipeline report over and over again. So building this transitioned him from using the Excel thing that he was so comfortable with to going into Domo. Now, a lot of you are probably going to have that same experience. There's going to be people in your organization that you want to transition, and this is a great use case for it. Other use cases, honestly, I don't have them. And let me tell you why I specifically called that out. Hey, lame jokes, right? So why am I calling this out, right? Why am I telling you that there's really, I don't have more to tell you? And it comes back to the fundamentals of people in this room. You all understand the difference between charts and Excel reports that have lots of numbers and the power of visualizations that tell stories, right? A dashboard with beautiful visualizations is going to get the leaders or multiple teams throughout your organization to make better business decisions because they'll be able to get better insights than looking at the numbers directly. So my recommendation is use charts first. But for those leaders that you need to transition, those people who are comfortable and really want the same Excel type format, that is where this is going to be the most valuable in your use cases. So the skills you're going to need for this session, it's not too technical, but some things that will make it really easy for you to complete are going to be basic HTML and CSS skills, some basic SQL, and actually not even really basic SQL, because I have the SQL already coded for you. All you need to know is how to copy and paste SQL. Really? That's it? I hope that that's something everyone can do. Actually, I know you guys can do it. So, and then lastly is data flow experience, which is going to be the hardest part of this, because you're going to be taking whatever data set you want to turn it into the Excel-like format. I can't give you any guidance about how to do that. That's going to be something you'll have to work through on your own. I'll give you some basic ideas about how to do it, but you really have to take your data and manipulate it that way. Now, I'm going to take a quick pause here and say two things. One, I've now gone through the expectations of what you're going to learn about in this session. So I'm going to do something that's a little weird and say, hey, if the description of this session or the title is not what you were intending it to be, this session is going to be valuable for a lot of people, but if you guys saw another session that you think is going to be more valuable to you, I'm not offended now that you understand the true context. So feel free to kind of get up and go to another session if you want to. Okay. I was actually expecting some people to leave, so maybe they're just still too afraid. But so the other thing that's important is at the end of this session, there's a box of handouts. So what I basically did is I went through and put step by step and handed it off to other people who haven't done this before so that they can build all this in the step-by-step guide, because it does involve SQL, it does involve some example HTML, those sorts of things, and multiple steps involved, and a SQL data flow. The handouts are going to be at the back in a box, so as you guys are walking out at the end, don't forget to grab that. And the other piece of advice that I want to give is you're going to be learning a lot at Domo Palooza this year. And you're going to have a crap ton of emails when you get back to work next week, right? So if you do what we've all done before, is you try to catch up with all your meetings and you don't put the effort in to try to implement a solution like this, you'll do what we all do, is you won't get to it. And so I highly recommend, tonight or tomorrow, just block out an hour or two of your time for next week or the week after to crunch through this. Because once you do that, once you just get started with it, it'll be a tool in your arsenal. But if you let it go too long, you'll forget about it. Okay, so we have three major sections: the concept, the detailed implementation, and we're going to build a card at the end. So we're going to kind of repeat things several times. So we have three major sections about how this works, how to build that Excel-like report. The first is going to be a table and layout design table. So it's a table of layout and design. And I'm going to do my best to try to be consistent as possible in terms of terminology, because you'll see that I'll be using design, layout, tables a lot. The next major piece is going to be a lookup table. I'll explain what those are in a bit. And lastly is going to be joining those two essentially together via the SQL data flow. So this is actually the example, the back end layout table / design, table layout design for what you saw in the previous slide. Now, I have these parts highlighted and are going to make it larger for those of you who need glasses like me. You'll see this lookup _C2_R5. I'll explain more about what that is, but it's important to understand the term that I'm going to use, which is going to be the lookup string, which is not the same thing as the lookup table, right? So I'm going to be using the layout table or design table. I'm going to use the lookup table. I'm going to be using lookup string a lot. So I want to make sure everyone understands and I be as consistent as possible so I don't lose you. I do know that I talk pretty fast. So again, if anyone gets super, super lost, kind of raise your hand and I can pause and slow down and maybe repeat something for everyone. The lookup table is really, really going to be a basic table that we're going to talk about. And it involves two major columns, which is going to be a lookup column and then the value. Now, what's in the lookup column? Surprise, surprise, the lookup string, right? So this is important. I'm going to try to be as consistent as possible with the terminology. And I will go into more details about how this is all built. But this is the table that essentially powers where the values come from that are put into the design table. Now let me talk about, as I mentioned, I'm not going to go into too much detail about building SQL data flows or magic ETL data flows about how to get your data into the lookup table that we were just looking at. But let me give you just a little bit of guidance on this. If you do it in a magic ETL, you're going to basically separate into this similar model of 3 major sections. The first section is you're going to utilize calculations and initial filters to filter down your data and put calculations so that you can then go to the next section, which is the major portion where you're filtering and you're grouping. Now, what is all this? Like, what's the goal? What are you trying to do? When you're thinking about building and designing your table, your Excel-like table, you need to identify individual values. So it's really important. You isolate individual values, and then you take that lookup string, you put them together in a row. That's what builds the lookup table. So let me just say that one more time, because I know that can be a little confusing with the terms. So you're going to isolate a single value, something like, in this case, you can see EMEA Q1 sales numbers, like a single numerical, well, actually it can be a text as well, but a single value. And then you're going to join, once it's isolated as a single value, you join the lookup string with it. And then that is how it gets mapped into the design table. And you'll see that more soon. Lastly, the last section is where you join in the strings. And then you'll join it all together to create a table. You'll append them all together to create a table. So again, I know I can't go too deep into this because everyone's going to have a different scenario about how they do this. So the thing to remember is going to be isolating a single value and then attaching the lookup string to it. So the next section, of course, is going to be about the SQL data flow. If you guys have not built a SQL data flow, not only do I have the steps in the handout, but I'm going to give you a little bit of overview about how to do that. Now, what happens with the SQL data flow is essentially to get your visualization around it is you're building the design, and your design is going to have HTML and then lookup strings as you're seeing in this image. Now, if you look very carefully at the green total line, you have these lookup string values, and I'm going to use a dramatic animation to show you this is what the SQL does. It basically takes that lookup value and replaces it with the value that you isolated in the lookup table. You with me so far? I told you I was going to say the lookup part's a lot, so I really hope that that's not too confusing with the terminology. So that's basically what the SQL does, is it does that replacement into your design table, which gives you the power to customize it in any which way that you would like. Okay, so that is the high-level part. Now we're going to go to the deep dive. Is everyone ready for that? Oh, God, okay, clearly we need alcohol now. So we're going to start off with the first section. If you have not built a Domo web form before, it's essentially a Google Sheets-like tool that Domo provides. The way you do that is you grab a connector. So you just like you would normally grab a connector, you choose Cloud App, you search for Webform or Domo, and it'll pop up as one of the connector options. You click it, and then an Excel or Google Sheets-like page comes up. So there's a lot going on here, but I want you to focus on the highlighted pieces. You're not going to be able to read it, so let me just describe what is here, or at least the people, the smart people in the front. No? No, a little bit? Okay. The part you're going to look up at the left side is the sort column. So this is simply there. It's basically hidden in the background. It keeps your rows in order. So you'll have the title of sort at the top. You'll have incremental values all the way down, 1, 2, 3, et cetera, depending on how many rows you have in your table. Then on the top, you're going to have column 1, column 2, column 3. So I encourage you to stay consistent with what I have here because the SQL queries are going to look for these column names. So if you rename it to something else, you'll have to rename your SQL code. And so let me just take a quick pause about a message that I'm going to kind of repeat a couple times throughout this session. The first time you do this, especially if you're following the guide, it should take you less than an hour. But it should only take you less than an hour to do it the first iteration if you keep it simple. Start with 1 or 2 values, 1 or 2, make it gold or green, just text, just do something simple. Because once you do the first iteration, if you have 2 values, you'll go to 50 in about 15 minutes. But if you start with 50, it'll take you 3 or 4 hours to get it to work. Right? So start simple. Your first iteration should just be 1 or 2 values, and then everything else will start falling together. So just to reiterate, you want to keep the column names consistent like what I have here, column 1, column 2, column 3, et cetera. So now I'm going to dive into the HTML a little bit, not a lot. So let me make this a little bit easier for everyone to read. What we're going to do for the HTML when you're trying to change the color or change the alignment, you're going to start off with your standard div tag. And if you are not familiar with HTML, I promise you someone in your organization is and can help you with this, and they'll be able to do it really quickly and help you out really quickly. So you start off with your standard div tag. You're going to have this part in red. That's the CSS part. Now, we don't need to go into the details, but what this basically does is it makes it bold, makes it 125% or 25% larger, and then chooses a color, and I don't remember what that one is. It's probably red. But you close the div tag, and your example text, that's what's affected by the design elements that you're seeing in the CSS piece. And lastly, you want to close off the div tag. And for those of you who are, this is really easy for you so far, let me give you like an advanced tip. The SQL code that I'm using will look for lookup strings inside of this text. So you can have your lookup values. They don't need to be isolated in cells. Like you can still color them and change them and align the values depending on how you want to do it. So the SQL query will do the replacement inside of all of this text. Is this okay so far? Like, is this making sense with the HTML and how that works? Okay, good. So here are the CSS variables that I know work so far. Font weight, which is going to do bold, italics, etc. Font size, color, text align. I also know that you can add image tags in there, which I'm not going to cover in this, but once you guys get into it, and if you know more about HTML, you know how that will work. Again, I'm going to stick with my theme of keep it simple, because we are hacking this. And Domo might change what is supported and not supported at any point in time because it's not an officially supported concept. So if you make it more complex, the more likely you are to have issues later. So let's talk about the lookup strings really briefly, mainly because I know a guy, he looks a lot like me, that used the string on the right. Now imagine how useful that lookup string on the right would be today, right? So I don't recommend doing too much context-specific lookup string. It just makes things too difficult to manage. If you use a good concept on the left, the lookup C1 R4 in my case, and I encourage you to use the same thing, stands for lookup column 1 row 4. So you're basically saying, I want this value to be in column 1 row 4 or column 10 row 8, that sort of thing. That's how you can map out where each value will go in your Excel-like spreadsheet. Another design tip, if you want to have blank columns or blank rows, you just use a simple blank div element. Okay, so now we're going to move into lookup table. Again, I'm not going to dive into this too much, but let me just remind you that when you're building the lookup table, you're using your data flows to build it. Keep the column names the same because that will work with the SQL that I've provided for you, unless, of course, you're more advanced and you can do the SQL code. The row order doesn't matter, so any which way the rows are in order is perfectly fine. And if you have questions for how to do this a little bit more, we can talk more about answering those at the end. And then lastly, let's go into the SQL part. This is going to be the hard part. Hopefully I do not explode too many minds in this, and I know that I'm talking really fast, so just kind of raise your hand if you think I'm going too fast. So if you've never built a SQL data flow before, I'm going to walk through each of the steps, and as a reminder, the handout at the end, don't forget, is going to have the code that you need already there. Now, unfortunately, it's in paper format, so you need to type it back in. Sorry about that, but it'll have everything you need. So let me give you the high-level piece about what you need to do for it. So first off, when you're going to build a SQL data flow, it's basically the same way that you build a normal data flow. You just choose SQL, and then you're going to name it first. Oh, hey, I can save you guys like $300. Ready for this? So Domo Consulting, right, they're like $300 an hour or something like that. One of their biggest pieces of advice that they give to everybody, and they'll charge you that time for that, which is to name your data flow the same name as your output table. It makes it much easier to find. So a lot of you are probably doing that right now, but boom, I just saved you $300. Yeah. So there's probably some Domo consultants in the back who are like, God dang it. So you're going to select the two data sets, right? The two data sets are going to be the design table and the lookup table. Whatever you named it originally is fine. I've covered for that use case already. Then you're going to add the transforms. All the transforms are in the handout that you need. I will cover what they look like and what they are, but you're not going to remember it after tonight. So, especially for those of you who like to party. So the key step to remember is that this is where you're going to enter in those transforms. There's going to be plenty of them. And then the second to last step is you're going to set an output layer, or set the output data set, which again you want to name the same as your title. And I've never done this before, ever. Never, ever did this before. But someone might have accidentally forgotten to trigger an update and cause all the data to get out of date, and then they got really in trouble, and people got really frustrated, especially at the end of the quarter. But don't make that same mistake. But I've never done it, I swear. See, lame jokes. I told you it was going to happen, didn't I? So that's how you do that. It is not as scary as it might seem if you've never done it before. So let's talk more about the transforms, as I said we were going to talk about. The first two transforms are simply going to be renaming your table. So whatever table name that you used, if you want to do sales data in one and marketing data in another, you might have different tables for those contexts. This is going to rename them to simply layout_table and lookup_table. That makes it so all the SQL code will work. Now the next part, the next part is going to be the major part of the transform. Now, I am not a brilliant SQL expert, so maybe someone in the audience can do this better than I can, but I was unable to find a way to do it dynamically. In other words, what you need to do is you need to take this code, actually, okay, this is getting super serious. We're like showing SQL on the page. We need to jack it off for this one. What you need to do is you need to take this code on the page and you actually need to copy and paste it or build a transform for every single column that you have. That does sound painful when I explain it to you, but really it's a less than a minute process to copy and paste this into a transform. You're only going to change the parts that are in orange, the thing that says column X. Basically, you're going to need one for column 1, another one for column 2, another one for column 3, etc. Now, if you're thinking, oh my God, it's going to get really painful because you're going to have 20, 30 columns, well, guess what? You broke rule number 1 of keep it simple, right? So really, you shouldn't need to get that far with that many columns. I know in my case, I think the max I've hit was like 12 or 13. So you really don't want to do any more than that. Does this make sense so far about like what you need to do? Like you're copy and paste this into the transforms. Like nodding heads. I see some nodding heads, maybe not. How about this? Raise of hands if you don't know what's going on. Don't worry, you won't be embarrassed. We got 1, we got 2. You were awesome. So in the handout, it'll literally walk you through the steps. But let me just reiterate it one more time because I know there's going to be some people who didn't raise their hands. Inside the SQL transform page, you're going to create a new transform. You'll copy and paste this code in. And you're going to rename it one at a time, column 1, column 2. So you do it each time as you're copying and paste. So it's going to be kind of hard to see because it's small text, but it'll look like this inside the SQL transform piece. Right? And this is an example of what column 2 will look like. When you're done, you'll click apply. Everything should be good. Okay, so the output, as I mentioned, you're going to want to name it the same. So I'm using, in the handout, there's going to be a different value in here, mainly because I wanted to touch on the people who might be a little bit more advanced and thinking about the more advanced pieces that they can do with their own table layouts, etc. So you can use the more advanced table option, which you're kind of seeing here, or in the handout, which has the standard about what most of you are going to do if you're following step by step in the handout guide. Okay. So I know that probably was pretty daunting, but it hopefully was pretty clear. And I can assure you I've given the handout to several people and they've walked through it and they felt pretty confident in it. So I really hope and expect that everyone in the audience can do that. Now, let's get into the last part. This is going to be the part that you've all done before. So you've all built cards before, or at least I hope you've all built cards before. I know there are some new people in the audience, but it's not, this is going to be super easy. It's like so super easy that I'm going to talk even faster just to keep your energy up and get you guys excited about this. Oh my God, we're going to build a card. It's the greatest thing ever. So the first thing we're going to do is select table. Boom. Who predicted that? You did, didn't you? Yes, you did. I see the smile on your face. Good job. She gets a trophy. Are there any trophies? There should be. The next step is going to be, you're going to drag and drop the columns, because you're in your design table, you're going to drag and drop your columns are all going to be named, column 1, column 2, column 3. Super easy. Next is you're going to use your sort column, and this is what's going to keep the rows in order. Now if your rows are reversed, pop quiz, okay, who wants to answer the pop quiz? What do you do in that case? I hear people saying it, say it louder. Yeah, exactly. Change it to descending. So you'll change it to descending. Whatever order you have set up, you want to make sure your rows stay that same, you'll switch it. Here's a hidden secret, which is going to make your report look clean. So this might be a little hard for you to read, but in your header row, there's a header font color option, and you're going to change that to transparent. Now, why is that? When you first drag and drop the column 1, column 2 into the page, it's going to have that as the header value. It's going to be ugly and not look nice. Unfortunately, there is no way to hide the top row, so it'll end up just being blank. We tolerate it because, again, we're doing hacking here. God, I hate saying hacking because it's not really, but you know what I mean. And that's it. Hey, I even got a thumbs up. So let's practice this again. By show of hands, like who feels as though like they could make this work? Okay, and I'm gonna hang out here afterwards. If anyone is like super lost, I really wanna help everybody. I really expect everybody should be able to do this, and the handout is, again, at the back. Don't forget that when you're walking out. So let me give you some final tips and tricks, some things I might have already said, is use as little HTML as possible. Keep it simple. Keep it as simple as you can. Now the SQL will replace, I mentioned this already, but some of you might be thinking of things that are more advanced, right? Say you wanted to do a dynamic background. You wanted it to be red if your ROI numbers were not high enough. Your value doesn't need to be numbers, it can be text. You can add in your lookup value. If you remember the lookup table, my lookup table just has the lookup string and a bunch of numbers. You could actually dynamically put in text where the numbers are and the numbers in between, and you can add a div tag and make it the background red or the color red or something like that. So you have a lot of power. You can even add images, etc. So it's amazingly powerful. But again, I tried not to cover that because we're going to keep it simple. And lastly, to the best of my knowledge, it does not work in the Domo mobile app. They are constantly updating it, but you look in the Domo mobile app and you get a lot of HTML. It doesn't look really nice. So the next part is going to be questions. Oh, great. OK, thank you. I was worried that some people are going to be nervous.
I'm bringing a mic so everybody can hear the question.
Yeah, because she's the star student sitting in the front row, she gets first choice. Yeah.
Have you tried emailing that? And what does it look like on email?
God, have I tried emailing that? I don't know if I have. I don't recall emailing it, mainly because my goal was to get people into Domo and not to email it directly to them, right? So that's
just
probably
the fact that it's not available on mobile app, and if your executives only rely on the mobile, so they would
yeah. I totally understand where you're coming from, right? If you want to build the email approach, I have not done that, so I can't tell you either way if it works.
fair.
Do you want your hands first? So go ahead.
Does it work on the Domo slideshow option?
Oh God, you guys are tough. So, yeah, again, I've not done that with it yet. I'm trying to think if I've done anything similar. And I know Brent Dykes, who's done another session. He did some HTML stuff. I haven't done it again, but I would actually estimate that one will probably work.
It doesn't work on the PowerPoint exports or
Oh, so it won't work on those either. All right. But does the other CSS types like colors and things work? Yeah, okay. That's the point about, keep it simple.
Is it possible to apply card filters, and have you tried to put percentages there?
So the simple answer is no, it does not work with filters. But the complex answer is it could. If you really wanted it to, like you could find ways to make it, there are ways to make it work. I haven't done it because I prefer to filter first in the data flows to produce the standard, right? Remember my key use case, and generally what your key use cases are going to be about replicating what has existed in Excel. And at least from what I've seen, most companies or most people are not building complex filters inside of Excel. Some people are, but.
Sorry to hit you with all these will it work on, but do you know if it will work on heat map tables?
No.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah, because it's a different type of table, right? It's not grabbing the columns. It's using the your three values. I don't remember what they are, but you'll have your X, your Y, and your series.
Just going to add one to your series of does it work with.
I never realized you guys really liked lame jokes. I didn't realize I'd get them back at me.
What happens if you export to Excel?
Well, he just said that it sometimes works and sometimes doesn't.
Got it.
But you have to kind of remember that if you're exporting to Excel, you're viewing it in Excel, and you put HTML in it, right? So
right.
I wouldn't really expect it to work that way.
You see the headers as like column 1, column 2, probably then the.
Would those still be there? I don't know.
Okay, just curious.
Anybody else have a question about if it works some way? But let me kind of reiterate one of the key messages here, right? Good visualizations are going to be the best way to have other people in your organization make the best decisions. And so use this solution sparingly, as much as you can. You need it, or it can be very valuable and can be needed, but you want to try to keep it sparingly as much as possible.
This is not a will it work on.
Thank you! She gets a trophy, a non-existent trophy.
In the example that you showed, there were like heading 4 rows of data a total. Is that dynamic? Could there be 5 rows of data, or can there only be 4?
Could you make it dynamic? Yes, but it would get a little tricky.
Okay.
So you remember how I had that blank row with the blank div? I think those rows would still show up if you put blank values in it. It might work that way. So you'd need to do it in a way where you had your layout table that had, say 50 rows.
Right.
But then you only show the amount that you need.
Yep.
Now the key thing I'm not 100% sure on, but if I remember correctly and you don't put any value in the row, it won't show up.
Right.
And then that would make it dynamic for you.
Wonderful.
Did everyone get that? That's a little bit of a
you.
tricky concept. So let me kind of like reiterate how that would work. So you're gonna have the design table, and if you want to create it dynamic, you're gonna make it like what you think the largest number of rows you'd need. Say 50 or please don't do that much. You're definitely not gonna be simple at that much. But then if you want to do a dynamic, so you have different dynamic customer bases or something like that, you can only put values for the customer bases that you need, and then the other ones should hide themselves automatically. So that would allow you to do the dynamic pieces. Okay, I saw some more hands.
Yeah, I think you just answered my question. I was going to ask if it was responsive.
Yeah, well, so responsive is a very abstract point, but the general answer is tables are not responsive. But did you have sort of like another thought?
I mean, for the HTML tags, like for example, if it's a certain width or height, is it going to fit to that size, or is it going to screw up?
Oh, so in keeping with keeping it simple, I don't recommend using things like padding and cell size and stuff like that. You can try it. I have tried it. I've had some success with it, but also some failures with it, because as you drag the screen smaller, if you set a fixed size and Domo's trying to shrink it, it didn't look pretty. Cool, I like you guys. These are awesome questions. Oh, he's got the mic.
Within the Domo web form, you probably don't want to do the moving around of columns, but then when you make the card, he's not listening. When you make the card, you can set the column widths, so that might solve that problem.
Oh yes, so there is the feature, for those of you who didn't get the context, so when you're building a table, there is a feature inside where you can set the width of a column. And to be perfectly honest, every time I've tried it, it never really worked the way I wanted it to. I know, but I did it 25%. I had 4 columns, and my first column was like 50%. I don't know what's going on, but yeah. More questions? Oh, we got one in the back. How am I doing on time here? This is counting down, so I guess I'm pretty ahead of schedule, huh? This is what I get for talking so fast. Thank you for keeping up with me.
Have you tried adding href on your HTML?
Oh,
Just
external
to make-
links? Yeah, you can do
yeah.
that. Yeah.
They work with href.
Yeah. You can do external links. I do it all the time, even outside of this context, right? So if I'm, I'll have a lot of reports that will, I'll add, an href in a beast mode, and that'll be, a customer report, and then I'll link to Salesforce so that as people are doing it, they can go, hey, I want to go directly to Salesforce to see it. So that's a pretty cool idea.
Do you have, or are you aware of any feature requests out on the dojo to make these types of cards more exportable? It sounds like there's issues with the HTML not exporting correctly.
I personally know that there's requests to try to give Domo web forms and the tables more Excel-like power. But this, again, we are hacking here, right? I'm a customer of Domo. I'm not a Domo employee. So we're kind of hacking things here to fill a gap that I know I've suffered from and a lot of people here have suffered from. So in terms of expecting Domo to support more of this, I kind of would expect them to go the opposite way. They would support less of the hacking and more features inside of their table type cards. And by the way, I know people are trickling out, totally cool. Just don't forget the handout on your way out. More questions? Is that it? You sure you guys don't want to know if it works in some other form? Okay, so I just want to say thank you everybody for coming today. Remember, keep it as simple as you can, and don't forget the handout on your way out.